Here is what it really costs you to start your own coffee roastery today. Roasting coffee is the dream of so many people, and there are a lot of roasteries out there, and a lot of people have built their own beautiful business by roasting coffee. But when you're at the point that you want to start, you might be faced to the question on what does it now cost me to start my own roastery? And this is something that we are going to break down in detail in this video. And I might have some good news, might have also some bad news for you. Good news is that nowadays there are very good ways to start with low investments, low risk. So take a pen, take a paper, take notes, because we are going in detail when it comes to tools, things that you will need and cost for them. I'm Ingo from Roastery, and now let's go. Coffee is such a beautiful place to work in. You are in contact with people from all over the world. You get coffees from all over the world, and then you're in touch with your consumers. Very often there are people that are then really passionate about coffee. They love flavors, they love origins. So it's a beautiful way of doing your own business. But on the other hand, then it's also something where you have to take some money in your hand, because you're then really working with physical products. And here usually people are then faced with the question, how much do I now really need? Of course, you can imagine that you need a coffee roaster, but we are going then to talk about in detail what are the tools that you're going to need, what you need to invest for each of them, so that you can then really build your own business case, build your own plan in order to start your own roastery and make your dream come true. And you will see that there are quite a lot of things that you need to buy and you need to invest in. But on the other hand, there are also ways where you can start really smartly, where you can build your own customer group, where you can learn the market, where you can learn what people like and build your consumer base before you take these big risks and these big investments. This is something we are now covering this video, and before we go into detail in all the several aspects, we have to do categories of things that you will need. And in this video, we are going to talk about 3 categories. The first category is the roasting machine and everything around the roasting machine. The roasting machine itself, the things around the roasting machine, are the biggest single investment, and it's most probably then also the most emotional for you, because this is really the tool you are going to work with and on which you are going to base your business. So it's important to have the right tool, to take the right investment here. Not too much, but also enough that you can then really build your business. So this is the first block. The second block then will be everything around for your roastery, so all the equipment you will need in addition to that. Here we are going to talk about sample roasters, then lab equipment. We are going to talk about things you need for your office, things you need for your warehouse, things you need like to sell coffee, like an online shop. So these are then investments that you need around your roastery in order then to start. And then we have a third block, which are then the operational costs. So not the initial cost that you're going to take in one time, but the costs then that will then be arising over like the length of your business when you're operational. And these are then mainly the cost for green coffee beans, the cost for overhead or for your personal, your salaries that you have, and then also the rents that you are paying. In addition to that, also costs for marketing, sales, and then other things like legal things, bags, and all that. So there are quite then some things that are coming in addition. I'm not going to dive deep into this part of operational cost, but it's just that this part is also related to the investments, especially in 2 domains. So when it's coming to the investment in a coffee roastery, you have to balance it then also with the salaries that you are paying, because the more efficient your machine is, so the less time you need to spend at your machine, the less you have to pay for salaries. And then on the other hand, if your machine is too big, you have bound a lot of money there, you have big investment there, and you need most probably also to pay more rent because you have a bigger roaster, you need more space and all that. So you need to balance this. And when we are now going to break down the cost, we are going to make that based on a roastery which has a 10 to 15 kilo roasting machine. This is actually the size that a lot of people like to start with. You can start your business with that. You can build a business where you're living from that. So you can roast with a 10 to 15 kilo machine around 20 to 50 tons of coffee per year, even maybe a little bit more. But this is kind of the sweet spot where I experienced a lot of people are working with when they're building that kind of a roastery. So we're taking this as an example. Then, of course, you might have a smaller roastery, you might have a bigger roastery. This might change, but we are going to take this as an example. And before you're then going to start to build this roast, before you're going to take all the money in your hand to build it, you need, of course, then to make your business plan, because then at the end, the business plan will be the thing that is going to tell you what kind of equipment you will need then in detail. And the business plan then will not only consist of the initial investment, so the equipment that you will need and the operational cost, but also about the output that you're going to generate. So it then will involve how much coffee are you going to sell, at what price, and this is then based on the positioning that you have. So you can be, for example, a roastery that is then focused on a mass market, more like a commercial roastery, where you're then roasting a larger amount of coffee beans, maybe at a lower price, maybe at lower margins, or you can be specialized in a certain specialty line or a certain quality where you're then building your brand. You can generate higher margins. You might most probably have a bit smaller amounts, or you can then also go into a niche, like, for example, say, I'm focusing myself on decafs. So you have different options where you can go in, and these are then depending and also directly related to the initial costs, to the setup that you need. So you need to balance this. Making a business plan and thinking all of this through is something that some people really love to do, and that is easy for some people to do. For some other people, it's quite overwhelming because they just don't know how is it then going to be, how big is the market going to be in the area where I live. So you have a lot of then also variables where you don't know how big they are, and it's going to be a bit hard for those people to build their business plan. They're just different peoples out there. But the point is that, especially for those people, you have other options to start. You are going to have options where you can start with really low investment, with really low risk, so that you can start building your business, that you can start finding your customers, finding out what they need, and then building a custom group which is giving you an operational cash flow that is then enabling you or giving you the confidence to say, okay, now I see how it's working, now I have my customers, and now I'm going to take the investment that we are now going to talk about and build my own roastery. This is something that we are going to talk about then later in this video. I'm giving you then ways which can enable you to do exactly this. But now let's go through the calculation what the setup of a coffee roastery with a, let's say, 10 to 15 kilo roaster is going to cost you if you want to fully build it up. Let's have a close look at the first category we talked about, which is the roasting machine and all the add-ons you need for your roasting machine. And here is a mistake that a lot of beginners are doing when starting to find their own roasting machine. They're letting themselves being confused by what they see on social media, because here often you have some influencers that are then even often ambassadors of roasting companies. They see them on those fancy machines and they think, I have to take this fancy machine, otherwise I'm not going to be able to roast a very nice cup of coffee. Actually, when you're looking behind the scenes of what people are really working with, so many of those roasters that you really look up to, if you see the roasting machines they're working with, you realize it's really other aspects you have to take into consideration when choosing a roasting machine. And we are going to break this down in detail. I cannot give you a full recommendation on how to choose a roasting machine for yourself. I'm really going to have a look at those aspects that have an influence on the calculation that you're going to have. So first thing is then, of course, the capacity of your machine. So how much you can roast in one batch. And here there are some information that you'll find on the website of the roasting machine manufacturers, but you have to understand that this information is not always accurate, because it then also depends on the roast style. So how long is a roast going to be? And this can vary quite a bit. And especially today, if you not always want to do those long roasts, but maybe also short specialty roasts where you can bring out all those floralities and new specialty flavors, then you will need more power to do shorter roasts, faster roasts. roasts without the risk of burning the beans. So you really need to reach out to other people and then find out what is the real capacity of this machine, or then really ask the manufacturers, ask them about the information of then really the power that you have in the machine, the burning power that you have in this machine, so that you can then really judge on how much power the machine is going to give you, so that you can calculate the batches, the batch size that you're going to be able to work with. And then next thing related to that is the possibility of giving you automation or automated roasting profiles on this machine. So what software do you have? Which options are in this software? How consistent is the machine? Because the more automation you can do, the less you have to spend on personnel, on salaries, on your own time standing at the machine. It's going to take some work from your shoulders. Of course, still you're roasting, you have to spend time at the machine, but it's just going to help you getting consistent results, but also taking work from your shoulders, or maybe then even hire people that don't have to be that deeply educated, that can be a bit less educated, a bit cheaper to work on, that you can then put in front of the machine and let them roast your batches day in and day out. So related to this automation topic is directly the software. And here you have to also check with the manufacturer what software is coming with the machine. Do you pay for the software? Is it free? Because some manufacturers that have softwares that are included in the price, other manufacturers, they're going to charge you a monthly fee for the software. And then you might also be considering if you're going to work only with the software that the machine manufacturer is going to provide you, or if you want to have other softwares then connected to that. There is, for example, Artisan, which is in general a free software, but which has also a paid plan that is giving you additional features. Or there is also Cropster, which is really popular, which is a good software to work with for professional coffee roasteries. But you have to pay then monthly fees there as well, subscriptions there as well. So this is something you have to take into consideration. But there's also something else you really need to think about when it comes to the software, or you really need to ask other people about their experiences, because software can also be something that can be troublesome in coffee roasting. In general, coffee roasting machines are quite simple machines, so they're not really difficult in their whole mechanic, in their whole structure. I mean, we are thinking of coffee roasting as an art and as something super difficult. In fact, it's not really. And then also the construction of roasting machine is not hyper complicated. Comes in addition that there are a lot of coffee roasters out there are people that are then really like handy people, that are people that like to do things, that can do repairs. So I hear very often from coffee roasters that the mechanical things on a machine are things that they usually are being able to solve quite quickly. But the things that are then really frustrating for a coffee roastery is if you have a lot of software issues. And this can happen in coffee roasting machines. And if your operation is being stuck because of software issues, then you're going to be quite frustrated and you're going to lose money because you're not that operational. These are also things that you cannot quickly solve, that are usually then also only to be solved by the manufacturer of the machine. So really go out, talk to people, ask them about the reliability issues of the software, make sure that you get a machine with a good software so that you have a long uptime and not much time where the machine is not going to be running. Then directly related to that is the topic of service. And this is something that you cannot really underestimate. Service is super important if you have a professional roasting setup. Because if you're having downtime, so if your machine is not running and you want to roast coffee, you're directly losing money because you cannot produce and sell the coffee you have. So you need to have a good support. Either be it locally, in best case, you have somebody that can then really come and directly fix your machine, or otherwise somebody that can really give you then direct instruction that is reachable, so that can communicate with them online, and that you have also the availability of spare parts so that you get them quickly and that you can then have your machine be running in a few hours, or in worst case, 1 or 2 days, and then you're back into business if you have an issue on your machine. So service is something that you will really then need to take into consideration, and which is usually for the successful roasters out there, one of the main, or even the main topic to look for when you're going to choose a coffee roasting machine. We just talked about capacity, but now your question is then, of course, how much capacity does my machine really need? And this is something that you really have to calculate through, because you're going to invest quite a bit of money in your coffee roasting machine, and it should be working for a couple of years. So it needs to be big enough so that you can then really grow your business, so that you can be working with it for 2-3 years and still be able to roast coffee. At the end, what's also to be mentioned, when your coffee roaster is then too small for you, you still have the possibility to sell it quite well. Coffee roasting machines are actually machines that are quite durable. So even if your machine is then too small for you, you can still sell it, you get good prices for it, and you can get a new machine. Nevertheless, it's an investment and it's also some costs to set it up. So make sure you have a machine that is big enough for you to grow. Take a bit a larger size, but then, as said before, the larger, of course, the machine is, the more money you have bound in the equipment and the bigger your space might be. So you might find the sweet spot here of having a bit a bigger machine of what you have now, but also not be too big with it. When we're talking about this range of 10 to 15 kilo roaster, 12 kilo roasters, they're often also, then you're price-wise about in the range of 30,000 euros. Can be 20, can be 40, some are even a little bit more expensive, but you're about in this range of about 30,000 euros. And what you have to check now when it comes to other equipment is, does the machine at that price be coming directly with a cyclone? Because a cyclone or any solution for then the chuffs is something that you need. You have chuffs that are being produced, and you need at the end a cyclone or any other solution to have the chuff collected. So make sure if this is included in the price, or if it's not included in the price, how much it would cost in addition. And another thing that you need to consider in your roasting machine is how to handle smoke, because in coffee roasting, smoke will be produced. And here it really then depends on the situation where you are. So if you're out in an industrial area where there are no people living, where you have maybe a bit less regulation, or if you're in a densely populated region, also it's depending on the city and country where you're living it. So you have local regulations and you need to consider that. And this is also an aspect that a lot of people are underestimating. So even just building an exhaust from your machine, a chimney, which is then bringing out the smoke, is often costing around 8,000, can be even a bit more money that it's costing, because it can be often more complicated than you think to build a chimney. So make sure you're going to calculate money for that. But the chimney often is not enough, because you often want to then reduce pollution, reduce smoke, maybe because of yourself, because you want to have less pollution, maybe because it's regulation. And for that, there are solutions out there. There are things like afterburners or then also smoke cleaners. There are a lot of solutions out there. And here you have to calculate. It's also then depending, of course, on the size and capacity you need, but it's then also quickly going to be 5,000 to 10,000, maybe even more in the region of 10,000 euros that you need to calculate for reducing then the pollution, reducing the smoke that you're going to produce, which is coming in addition and often is mandatory, or maybe something that you just want to do because you're taking concerns for the environment out there. And then some other equipments that you will be considering are destoner or color sorters. Destoners are tools. They are a little bit more simple because they're just then taking the stones out of the coffee. The cheaper the green coffee is that you're buying, the more important it is to invest in a destoner, because the more stones you're going to have in your green coffee, the more expensive the green coffee is you're going to buy, the less stones you have. But at one point, then you will be really considering having a destoner, because if one of your customers or if some of your customers have stones in their coffee, they're really going to be unhappy. Maybe even their grinder is going to be broken or damaged because of that. You will have unhappy customers. So this is something to consider. Or another solution then, instead of a destoner, will be a color sorter, which is then in addition to that also taking out, for example, Quakers, beans that are not beautiful. Usually there are digital things that you can then set up and then choose what you are going to take out and how much you're going to leave in. So investing in these tools is dependent on the quality of the green coffee you are going to buy, but also then your expected quality that you want to deliver to customers. And like a color sorter, they can be then around 10,000–15,000 euros. They're a little bit more expensive. They're high-tech tools very often. A destoner, they're often in the region of 3,000 to 8,000 euros. So calculate this if you then also want to enhance the quality of the coffee that you're going to give out to your customers. And another thing you don't have to buy, but you might be considering to buy, is a so-called loader. You can imagine then roasting coffee is really like handcraft, or it's really something where you're moving heavy weights. Usually taking out the roasted coffee is not so tough because you have here the cooler and then you're opening the cooler, you have your buckets where you put in the coffee, but handling the green coffee that you're going to put in the machine at the quite high height is something that is going to be heavy, that is going to affect your back. There are solutions out there. The most commonly used way to do this are so-called loaders, which are then working with pressurized air. So you can then fill the coffee like at the floor, and the coffee is then being put by pressured air into your roasting machine. These are tools that are then also costing between 4,000 and 7,000 euros. So take that into consideration. Your back is going to say thank you for the investment you did in a loader. And then we talked about the roasting machine, but the roasting machine has to be standing somewhere. So you need the infrastructure, you need also the place where you are. So you need to invest in a room, in a rent. You need to invest in installation of electricity, of gas if you have a gas roaster. Then also, as said, in the exhaust air, but then like the installation of electricity and gas is also often costing you around, from 3,000 euros, it can be onwards, but let's calculate around 3,000 euro for this installation. In addition to that, you might also be investing then in construction for the place where you are. This is something that I'm not going to put in the calculation here because this is very individual based on the place where you are going to set up your roastery. So calculating all this together, we are then quickly at around 60,000, maybe even 70,000 euros that you're going to invest just in your roasting machine and the setup of your roasting machine with all the necessary add-ons that you have. And now we are going into the second category, and these are then the additional things you need to invest in. And let's start now with a sample roaster. A sample roaster is a tool that each roastery needs, and a sample roaster has actually two functions. One is it's going to help you to buy the right green coffee beans. When you're then operational in your roastery, the most important job you have is buying the right green coffee beans. So you need to have good sensory quality. You need to have this at a low price. Maybe you then also have standards when it comes to sustainability, to trade standards. So you need to find then the green coffee bean that suits your needs or your customer or the product you want to produce. But as said, at the end, it's still the sensory part that is most crucial. So you need to be able to evaluate your coffee in order to find out which is the right green coffee bean for your assortment. Once you have bought the coffee, it's in the storage, it's going to age. So you need then also to be evaluating it from time to time in order to see if it's still good, if then the quality is still the same, or if you need to blend it, for example, and use it in another way than, for example, a single origin. And the second job of a sample roaster is then it's going to help you to find the right roasting profile for this particular bean. Because if you would just put in the bean in your roaster and then do try and error, you will need quite a lot of beans until you find the right roasting profile for it. You will produce quite some coffee that is not perfect. And since you want to produce good quality of coffee, you will use your sample roaster first in order to find out which is then going to be the right profile for your beans. You cannot translate the profile of a sample roaster directly on a big roaster, but you get enough information from the sample roaster that will help you then to create the right profile for your big roaster. So on one hand, it's then of course the color of your roasted bean, how light or dark you're going to roast it, but then also how slow or fast you're going to roast it. What is the development time ratio that you're going to work with? What is the temperature increase after first crack that you're going to work with? How aggressive the curve is you're going to work with. So these are all information that you can then work out on your sample roaster, and then you have a solid basis to start your first roast with this bean on your production roaster. And sample roaster is a very dynamic group of roasting machines out there. While About 10 years ago, you had actually two categories. You had these very big, very expensive, but also not really fantastic sample roasters out there that costed 10,000s of euros. Or then on the other hand, you had these really basic home roasters out there, which didn't really enable you to do really nice profiles. So you had like this basic category or then the very expensive category. And in the last 10 years, that changed so much. So now we have really great sample roasters that cost you a couple of €1,000, but that are going to give you great results. And also here in this category, you have to look that you're not going to overspend, because there are a lot of sample roasters out there that are being promoted on social media by influencers, by ambassadors, where you think, oh, I have to invest a lot of money in a sample roaster. I think from my experience, you get a very good sample roaster at about €2,000. So for example, the Nucleus Link, which is coming with more than 1,000 roasting profiles, so that you can then really roast each sample to its best expression, and that you then really know which is the right bean for you to choose. Or you have also the possibility to then roast each bean with different variation, with different profiles, so that you get then the information which is the right profile for you. This is a great option at around even a bit less than €2,000. Or if you want to even spend a bit less, then for example the Cafe Logic Nano 7, which is the same hardware but with a bit less profiles, is a great option. It still has some profiles that it's coming with, and it gives you then a good basis to then roast samples at really low prices. So I would look into that and then calculate between 1,000 and 2,000 euros for a really good sample roaster. By the way, we have a broad range of sample roasters and a lot of customers in Europe that are working with these sample roasters. Just have a look at our website if you want to dive deeper into this topic. And then the next category is the lab, so the quality control that you need in order then to produce a good and consistent result. This is really critical, and it must not be underestimated, because at the end then, imagine even if you do a really nice roast but you're inconsistent, for example in the color of the coffee that you are going to produce. If a coffee shop has your coffee, they have set up the coffee machines to your beans, and now you're going to deliver a bit lighter or a bit darker beans, then the grind is different. The coffees will be over-extracted or under-extracted. It will be sour or bitter. People or customers, they will complain, and then the coffee shop is going to choose another supplier for their coffee. So you're going to lose this coffee that you have then acquired with a lot of energy. And therefore, it's really important that you have consistency, that you have a good quality control when it comes to the coffee you're going to produce and to sell. Therefore, you're going to need some cupping equipment, so a cupping standard. ICA cupping is something that's really important. I also did videos on this, which you can find here. You find a lot of information on that on the internet as well. So you're going to need these cupping balls, you're going to need cupping spoons, you are going to need some scales. You might most probably already have scales because you're already a barista, I assume. So have a scale with a timer, have a water kettle to do the cupping. And what's then also something that might cost a little bit, and where I'm not sure if you have it already, is a good grinder. So of course, if you want to start really low budget, you can even use a hand grinder. But I would really recommend you then to invest in a good grinder like I have, for example, the Malkönig EK43. Just a grinder where you have then single doses, where you can put in your beans, where you have no coffee that is then being remained from the previous grinds, and that you can then really do your 12-gram portions that you need for a cupping setup. So this is something where you might need to invest, let's say, about 3,000 euros, maybe, depending on the grinder you take. So maybe between 700 and 2,500 euros for this cupping setup. And then for your quality control, there are also measuring devices out there. These measurement devices used to be quite expensive. Therefore, a lot of roasters were thinking about, do I really need them? Do I really want to buy them or not? Meanwhile, you get really good equipment at quite low prices. So what you need is, on one hand, like a moisture content and density analyzer. Moisture content is super important when it comes then to the quality of the green coffee beans that you're buying and that is in your warehouse. Density is an information that is really helpful to do nice roasting profile. So this is one tool that you need. Usually it's combined in one tool. And then the other tool that you're going to need is a color analyzer, which is then analyzing the color of your roasted coffee. These are the tools that are important, and they are meanwhile quite affordable. For example, when you're having a look at the coffee meters A1 and M1, then you will be paying around 700 euros for the whole set. If you then will be investing a bit more in a more advanced tool, you might have a look at tools like the Omix Plus from Dyfluid, which is around 2,500 or 3,000 euros. So all of these tools are then also in our shop. I'm putting the link here. This is just something that you will need in order to make sure that you are delivering a consistent quality. And then there is the handling of the coffee when it's coming out of your roastery. So there's the packing of your roasted coffee, there is the weighing of your roasted coffee, there is the sealing of the coffee bags. So here you will also then need to work with equipment, especially if you're a little bit larger at the beginning. Maybe you can then fill and seal your bags yourself, but at one point it's just going to be too much and you might want to invest in those fillers. So there are filling machines that are then going to fill your bags automatically. There are also then heated sealers where you can then seal your bags very efficiently. This is something that you need to be investing in quite shortly because it's going to make you much more efficient. And in addition to that, you will then also have the investments in your warehouse where you're on one hand storing your green coffee beans. So you have pallets, you have then the carts to move around the pallets. I don't know the English name actually, but you know what I mean. So you can move around the pallets and the big bags. You will have those buckets for the green coffee beans, but also for the roasted coffee. You will then have the shelves where you put in your bags, your coffees and all that. So these are investments that are then coming together at around 3,500 up to 5,000 euros, depending on what equipment you're buying. But you need to invest here something in order to have then good quality of the products that you're storing, but also efficient processes. And not to forget is then the investment in office infrastructure that you need. You need a computer, you need a desk, you need a chair to sit in, you need a phone, you need a printer, maybe also a label printer for the labels that you're going to print. So these things is then something that you might also be considering. Most probably you already have them. If you need to buy all of that, that will also be something like around 3,000 euros, so that you have then your office in order to start. And last but not least, there is also then the topic of legal requirements and permits that you need to take money aside. This is really then depending on where you are, what regulations you have, what you need. But very often it can then cost quite a bit of money to do then those legal discussions with some lawyers maybe even, or go to the cities having permits. So take maybe something like 3,000 euros aside in order to make sure that you have money to invest in all of that. Make sure again you have a setup which is clean, which is good to go. So make sure that you're considering this, and this is really then depending on where you are and what regulations you have. So it's a bit difficult to give here an exact number for that. And you don't only want to produce your coffee, you also want to sell your coffee. So you need to have some selling solutions. So either you do wholesale, but most probably you're going to sell also then to retail customer. You might need to have an online shop. So you might need to invest in this Shopify structure, for example, or whatever you take, then all the processes behind, so that you can then efficiently sell your coffee and ship your coffee to customers. This is something to take into consideration. There is, of course, a lot of information out there then when it comes to online shops and all that. I'm not going to cover that in detail, but this is, of course, something you have to then consider as well when building your business, because you want to sell your coffee. You don't only want to roast it. So taking all of this together, you will be landing at somewhere between 80 and 100,000 euros to start your own coffee roastery. But here's the good news, you don't need 100,000 euros in order to start your own coffee roastery. There are also other ways that are much cheaper and ways that involve much less risk. And I'm going to talk now about those ways, how you can start your own roastery at a lower scale, at lower investments and at lower risks. And one of the reasons why this is now possible are coffee roasting machines like particularly the Aillio Bullets. There are meanwhile 17,000 Aillio Bullets out there, and about half of them are then being used for professional roasteries or for people that are starting their own coffee roastery. So assume that there are about 8,000 other people out there that started their coffee venture, that started their coffee business with an Aillio Bullet, that are still working with this machine, or that now have moved to larger operations and then use this to build their own customer group, to understand what the market needs, to understand which coffees to source, how to sell them, and then have a basis in order to take the decision to get into a large roastery. The Aillio Bullet is a machine that we are also selling, so we are selling them in Europe. We have a lot of customers working here with, and the machines are really super reliable. They can roast up to 1.2 kilo in about 8 minutes for a really nice roast. So you have about 8 minutes roasting, 2 minutes then heating up for the next roast. So you can do 5 to even 6 roasts in an hour, but let's calculate with 5 roasts an hour. So if you're then really investing a lot of time and you're hard working with this machine, you can then easily roast about 5 tons. Some people are then even working with, let's say, 2 Aillio Bullets so that they can go up to about 10 tons a year. And so like that, you can then already start building your own business, just assuming that you may have a margin of about 10 euros per kilo that you're selling. You might be landing at already a revenue for you between 50,000 and 100,000 euros. So this is something which you can then already use to start your own micro roastery and then build the basis to then further invest and build a bigger operation. The machines are coming with a really good software. They have good automation. They have great support. They have support in Europe where you get then the spare parts, where you get quick support. And they are really mobile so that you can actually start your roastery even in your garage or somewhere. Usually also then the regulation for working with a small machine like that are a bit lower. So you can then really start with this machine at quite low prices and build your own business. By the way, we are also offering a bundle which is very popular with people, where you have an Aillio Bullet, a link sample roaster, an omics tool, some green coffee beans, some bags and some books to start to work with. I'm going to link that in the description if this is something for you. So much for the promotion of the Aillio Bullet, but we're now getting back to the topic of how to start your own roastery. So we've been talking about starting like that, where you really have a low investment, but then of course you can just scale to, let's say 5 to maybe if you're super efficient, 10 tons per year that you're producing. But then there is also another way when you're moving further from your Aillio Bullet solution, where you don't already have to spend those 100,000 euros, because if you're looking out there, you will see that in a lot of villages and towns and cities, there are so many roasteries out there. They have all the infrastructure, but they're just roasting 1 or 2 days per week. So for 5 or 6 days a week, the whole equipment is standing still. And you might to reach out to other roasteries and ask them about collaborations. There are also co-roasting spaces out there in more and more cities. Or then just approach them, ask them for collaboration. If you can rent those equipment, that you don't have to invest the whole money. Some people are open to that, some are not. But another solution would then also be to do contract roasting, so that you go to this roastery, that you pay them then so that they roast the coffee for you. Like that, you don't have an investment. You have, of course, then the cost, but the risk is much lower. And you can then invest your time and money into building your market, finding your customer groups, start to sell your coffee. And then when you're at the point that you say, now I'm confident to start my own roastery, you're going to take these 100,000 euros in your hand and you're going to build your own roastery at that point with an already existing customer group and an already existing operation. I hope this was helpful for you and gave you an idea on how much you will need to spend and what other ways there are to start your own roastery. I also want to mention that I did a blog where we then covered in detail what exact tools you will need. So we have a checklist for all the tools you might want to need for your roastery. Just have a look at the link here or also down in the description. Also, when we talked about tools like Aillio Bullets or sample roasters or measuring devices or other equipment, we are selling them in Europe. So we have a warehouse in Germany from which we are selling all over the European Union. We have a service center in Germany. We have spare parts in stock so that we can then really support you in building your operations. You have the same in Switzerland for the Swiss customers, but I assume most of you are somewhere in the European Union. So have a look at our web shop, have a look what we are offering you. And on our website, you'll find also a lot of information about coffee roasting, green coffee beans, equipment. And in addition to that, we also have an online academy where we share information about coffee roasting. We have courses that we are going free if people are buying equipment from us. If this is something for you, then make sure you head over to our website, roasterless.com.